Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I hope you're all happy and healthy doing the things that you love with those you love to do them with. It's Friday night. I hope you're all strapped in. We've got a show tonight. We've got to talk about a little bit about Tottenham stuff. We've got a new player to bring to your attention. Yes, he is another child. Another day in old Crash FC. We got Connor Levinomics here to talk us through loads of bits and pieces. We got the look, we're going to talk a little bit about. I should have said this to you backstage. Connor, be careful on the choice of language used. We can't say certain things that rhyme with grape. We got to talk about obviously Arsenal's participation in whatever's going on there. And also, to be entirely honest, how do we feel a little bit about Vinai, our new CEO, being a part of that decision? He was the CEO of the club, Arsenal, when they first heard about all that story. So, and there's obviously some other extenuating circumstances, and there are other precedents that have been set around football with, like, Manchester City. There was one with, with Everton. There was one with Adam Johnson. There's a few that we can look at to see how other clubs sort of behaved when those sorts of things were brought to the attention of the football club. So it's not all entirely clear on what the only way or the best path of action is. But we do want to talk about that. And of course, we've got to talk about the UEFA rules as well, because there has been some interesting updates today with regards Chelsea and Aston Villa, the fines they've been given, the detail there, and how that looks really. You know, ultimately, to me, any amount of fines isn't really good enough if you still allow them to participate in the competition. I think the whole thing's ridiculous. But for what it's worth, and Connor and I are going to go through it with you guys, it is, well, I guess, a step in the right direction. It's certainly more severe in the punishments than probably we were expecting. But we have to talk a little bit about that. Before we get into it, all guys, smash the like button for me if you haven't already. And if you enjoy the content, hit the subscribe, rather, if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell and drop the comments throughout. We'll try and bring them up as we go along. I hope everyone is locked in. It's your Friday night. Connor, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you, mate. You okay?
Yeah, good to see you, mate. Yeah, very, very well. Thank you. Rock and roll Fridays, as always, right? Talking about football finance and other bits. But yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good.
It wasn't that many years ago that I don't think, from about 4:45 on a Friday night, I didn't see my home. Well, from 4:45 on a Friday night when I finished work, I didn't basically get home until about Sunday evening, and then I had about 6 hours sleep before it all started again. These days, it's just sitting in front of my computer every day.
Yes, mate. I know how it feels. My wife's commented that she's happy that I'm not going out as much, but I'm still spending time away from her doing these podcasts. So anyway,
she's losing you, but not to other women, to other men, but in a weird kind of way. Football, losing you to football.
Indeed, mate.
It's good to see everybody. You got a fan here, mate. Connor is great. 1 minute late, says Measly Candy. Your day is ruined. Apologies. Elite Spurs have signed another kid. Yeah, we're going to talk about that first. Good to see you, Druzilla. Good to see Batu, Eugene. Good to see everybody. Effing hell. Evening all. Evening, everybody. Please, like I say, smash the likes and keep the chat flowing as we go through. Let's start with the news that Tottenham have signed a new toy for us to play with, a new kid. Also, the ladies' team has got a new manager in Martin Ho, I think his name is. Don't know anything about that. Don't know anything about the women's team, and so I'm not going to comment too much. But hopefully, he can do better than the last guy, who wasn't particularly sensational, as far as I'm aware. Let's quickly have a look at this one, Johnny. Connor, I said Johnny then. McFadden is this kid's name. I need to get the overlay out of the way first. Come on, Butler, you're better than that. And then we can bring it up into the chat. Here we go. We are delighted to announce the signing of Max McFadden following his departure from Leeds United. The 19-year-old attacking midfielder has signed a contract with the club until 2027 and will join up with our under-21 squad ahead of the 25-26 season. Max has spent the last 3 years in the academy at Ellen Roadside, stepping up to their under-21s in the summer of 2024 and playing against us in the Premier League 2 last season. Prior to joining Leeds, Max spent time in the youth ranks at Colchester, West Ham and Southend United. Good luck to him. 19 years old, mate, to come into the academy setup on like development contracts. It's a little bit late, isn't it, for someone to be joining, out of an academy into another academy by 19. You think that they've kind of already made their mark where they're going to be and they go out on loan, but we seem to have stolen him. We've stolen Oliver Boast last week. We took Archie Gray last year. We're trying to get his brother Harry Gray. I made this point a couple of shows ago, saying, there is that notion out there that Daniel Levy has burnt a few too many bridges, and there's not that many clubs available for him to do business with. And Leeds United seem to be one that we might end up burning that bridge if we keep stealing all their top prospects.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? As you say, we've done a number with Leeds, haven't we? Not just in recent history, but actually, a bit further back as well. And does make you wonder whether it was some part of the agreement on Archie Gray, right? That we maybe had our eye on some of their other academy prospects at that time or whatever. But yeah, look, to be honest, I can't talk too much about him. Never heard of him before.
Yeah,
it's hard to get too excited or to, about these signings, isn't it? Given the work we know we need to do to the first team squad, but at the same time, it is important to make sure we're bringing through that next phase of players as well. So, whatever.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Listen, we'll just wish him luck, and hopefully we'll see him in about 5 years when he's gone out on loan 4 times, and we'll hear his name one more time when we're talking about whether we should keep, loan, or sell. But good luck to him. Good luck to him, Mr. McFadden. Drew's been a member for 24 months. Time flies when you're walking the dog, getting hacked, walking the dog more, falling for a Helga, and winning a cup. Big up, mate. On the way to 100K. Well, maybe, mate. I hope so. Thank you so much for your ongoing loyalty, mate. Appreciate you more and more every day, Drew. You're a legend, mate, and I can't wait to share the screen with you even very, very soon, mate. Appreciate you so much, buddy, for your loyalty. Thanks, buddy. Joshua's in as well, saying the contract expires, then get charged. Coincidence? Yeah, let's talk about Arsenal before we get into the UEFA stuff, mate. It's not going to be a massively long show tonight. And by the way, we are going to be handing you over to Sava at the end of the show, so hang around, and when we're done, you'll redirect over. I think his show starts in about an hour's time or so. So the Arsenal story, right? So he's been, I've got the story here, but we can just sort of chew through it. He's essentially been charged with 5 counts of rape, 3 with one lady, 2 with another, and then a sexual assault charge with a third. Look, I don't know any of the details of the actual offences, obviously, but what's your take on first of all, the Crown Prosecution Service waiting until 4 days after his contract expired? Does that not seem a little bit suspicious in and of itself?
Yeah, it's the short answer to it. It's very, very odd. Look, I think these types of crimes, as we all know, are notoriously really difficult to convict. Yeah. And it's got one of the lowest conviction rates, right? And so, it doesn't surprise me that sometimes it takes a lot of time, particularly when you've got, on the other side of the fence, someone that is hugely famous and hugely lawyered up. So, it doesn't surprise me that it's taken an amount of time, but that timing overall stinks, right? 3 years total, I mean, is outrageous. And then to be, as you say, a couple of days after his contract is up with Arsenal, seems very, very odd.
Yeah, and I'm just, I mean, look, I think someone said incoming conspiracy, razzle dazzle, 100%. You know what I'm like with the conspiracy. I like to sort of connect the dots that maybe do exist, maybe don't exist, and we'll see. But obviously, everything's alleged at this stage, so I'm not going to be going into any of that kind of stuff. But I do think that the kind of the situation here, for me, that's more annoying is the fact that Arsenal decided to essentially not cover it up, but like you could tell all of the clips that are circulating now on Twitter of Arteta almost letting things slip out. He got an injury. What's the injury? He's just injured. He felt a knock. He felt something. To me, it's just a little bit outrageous. I think that and surely that is also complicit with the Crown Prosecution Service, who's Keir Starmer, ex-Arsenal, ex-CPS, head of CPS, Arsenal fan. I don't know. To me, it just feels like the fact that they allowed the contract to run down so that he can now go on and sign a contract elsewhere before anything was brought to the attention. To me, there's no smoke without fire. I think it's outrageous that they could do that. The club should have suspended him like Manchester City, I think, did with Mendy, like what Everton did with was it Sigurdsson? Who was it? Gylfi Sigurdsson, the other one.
Yeah,
and then Adam Johnson as well, right?
Yeah, there's a few points. I mean, people throwing the Mendy example up as a reason why Arsenal couldn't, because obviously Mendy then subsequently sued City. But the difference is Mendy subsequently sued City because they suspended him and dismissed him without pay. So, you know, my understanding is there would be nothing prohibiting Arsenal suspending party to doing, you know, pending the investigation, provided they paid him. So, you know, look, this isn't the time to point score with Arsenal as a football club because, you know, because we're Spurs fans and obviously the victims, etc., are much more important. But one thing I would say, as you know, Arsenal like to hold themselves as these moral bastions of football, you know, in the face of oil states sponsoring other clubs and, you know, the marbled halls at Arsenal and everything else. But you know, there is no way that this does nothing but reflect absolutely terribly on them.
Yeah, 100%. People are throwing up some of other examples in the chat here. Mason Greenwood was suspended, and I think with pay, and then essentially asked to leave the football club. Obviously, those charges were dropped against him. So this is from the Athletic. Have other players been charged with similar crimes played on for their clubs? English football has known a number of high-profile players to answer sexual assault charges in recent years, with Partey the latest name to leave his new former employer facing criticism. Benjamin Mendy, the former City fullback, was another to face multiple counts of rape when charged by, sorry, I've just said the word, damn it, by Cheshire Police in August 2021. City responded by suspending Mendy, who denied all charges at that point, but the France international had remained available for selection during the initial investigation. He was eventually found not guilty of all charges, but had left City at the time of his full acquittal. He later won the main part of an employment tribunal against the club that saw him claim £11 million in unpaid wages. The point you're just making. Sunderland were willing to continue playing the former England winger Adam Johnson after he was charged for having sexual activity with a child. Johnson remained a regular starter up until the weekend before the beginning of his trial. I mean, that's where he pleaded guilty. Gee whiz, that's even worse. If they knew he was going to plead guilty to sexual activity with a child under the age of 16 and grooming. Sunderland only terminated Johnson's contract at that point. He was later sentenced to 6 years in prison. Another case, maintaining the anonymity of the professional footballer arrested throughout, took a very different approach. That player was suspended by his club shortly after his arrest in 2021 on suspicion of multiple child offences and remained unavailable throughout his
Everton one, isn't it?
I think that must be, yeah. So I probably shouldn't have said his name then, if I'm going to get in trouble. We'll just walk away from that one. He was told he would face no action 20 months later after his case failed to reach the threshold to set out on the code for Crown prosecutors. Partey is scheduled to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on Tuesday. The 32-year-old is a free agent for the last 4 days. Is still able to pursue the next step in his career, but any club wishing to offer a fresh challenge will do so, knowing Partey has serious charges to answer in the UK. So there's obviously a few others as well, isn't there, knocking about that haven't been left on that list. In terms of obviously with the Adam Johnson one, it was crazy that they actually let him play knowing that he was going to plead guilty. That's pretty wild, isn't it? Yeah, really bad.
Particularly involving obviously a minor as well.
Yeah, well, what do your... Let's make this sort of bring us back to Tottenham full circle here. If, generally speaking, if we have an issue with the fact that Arsenal didn't take a different approach, should we have an issue with Vinai Venkatesham for being a part and probably a large part of that decision? Because he's now part of us.
Yeah, I think there's some questions. You know, I've seen a bit on Twitter today about it, right? You know, people rightfully asking the question. I mean, you know, what I suppose before we get too excited, we obviously don't know exactly what Arsenal knew, what Vinai knew, whether, you know, who's to say that maybe the overall Arsenal treatment of this wasn't something Vinai considered when he resigned, right? You know, we don't know any of this stuff, so a lot of it is, you know, us speculating or whatever else. But, you know, I think what we can probably say without doubt is that he would have known, you know, given his role, and he would have, you know, because it was clearly a massive risk to the club's reputation. So, but what we don't know is what his stance on it was, you know, what his views were, etc., etc. So, look, Yeah, I mean, cryptics, obviously, before we get too excited, was a bad turn of phrase. But yeah, look, I think we just have to see how this plays out. I don't think Tottenham will say anything at this stage, obviously, because they're just not going to want to get involved at all. And obviously, you have to be really careful what you say given the legal proceedings. But
yeah. On that
yeah,
note, by the way, I'd
people
like to completely preface everything anything and everything I have said, will say, and will say in the future with alleged in front of it. And apologies if I said anything out of turn. I don't know anything, so please forgive me. For any lawyers that are watching. Yeah, I think you're right about the. Just out of curiosity, was Bissouma alleged to have done something? Someone's saying in the chat.
Yeah, back at Brighton, back in the day, wasn't he? I think.
Was he alleged to have done something as well?
Yeah, but wasn't charged or wasn't, It didn't go through.
Wow, so. I forgot all about that. A couple of super chats. Super Spurs TV. Blaine, big up Blaine. More cheating than an episode of Love Island. Blood boiled. Big up, lads. Yeah, thanks, mate. Appreciate your loyalty as well, buddy. 22 months, long time. Yeah, look, I mean, I don't know too much what else to say about the case with regards Thomas Partey, but I definitely think that that there's got to be some more to come out about that with regards who knew what and how that figure that kind of came out, because someone else is saying, yeah, the Crown prosecution have a case to answer here. I completely agree. It's weird. The timing of it seems suspicious. And then someone has said tinfoil hat time. Hang on a second, where is it? Tinfoil hat on, says Johnny Phelan. I Googled countries with no extradition treaty with Britain, Saudi and Turkey were on the list. It's interesting, isn't it? That's the he might be straight on a plane yesterday out to Turkey to get a deal with Fenerbahce, which would again scupper us because we're trying to offload Bissouma out there at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think you're right. We're probably best moving on before we get ourselves either into legal trouble or use the wrong turn of phrase for this.
Yeah, 100%. I'm sure it's already demonetized anyway. Blaine, great to see you, mate. Thank you so much for your generosity. Gifted 5 Spurs Talk memberships. Please, if you are a recipient of that, please make sure you say thank you to Blaine. Blaine, gonna have to get you back on the show as well real soon with Drew Ziller as well, mate. I'll be in touch with you guys in a couple of days. Let's move on from the Thomas Partey thing, because it's definitely smoke, but we don't know what colour the smoke is going to turn. So let's wait and see with that one. But mate, let's talk a little about this UEFA deal, right? So I've got the story in front of me here. I've got the BBC's version of it, because this is the most, for me, the biggest deal of the day by an absolute mile. So Chelsea and Aston Villa fined for breaching UEFA financial rules. Chelsea and Aston Villa have been fined for UEFA by UEFA for breaching the European governing body's financial rules. The two clubs could be prevented from registering new players from UEFA competition for the forthcoming season unless they have a positive transfer balance by the end of the summer transfer window. Chelsea have been fined €31 million, £27 million, and could be fined a further £60 million, £51 million if they do not comply with the rules in the next 4 years. Villa have been fined 11 million, like £9.5 million, with a further €15 million, £12.9 million, conditional on compliance in a 3-year period. How does that work? The punishments relate to a breach of UEFA football earnings rule and having a squad cost ratio, the proportion of their income paid out in wages, above 80%, which becomes 70% next year, if I'm not mistaken, Connor. Yeah. Chelsea are due to compete in the Champions League in 25-26 with Aston Villa in the Europa League. In a statement, Chelsea said, the club has worked closely and transparently with UEFA to provide a full and detailed breakdown of its financial reporting, which indicates that the financial performance of the club is on a strong upwards trajectory. Chelsea FC greatly values its relationship with UEFA and considered it important to bring this matter to a swift conclusion by entering into a settlement agreement. Bravo. Bravo. The punishments were issued by UEFA's club financial control body. In a statement, the CFCB said profits from the sale of tangible or intangible assets, the exchange of players, and the transfers of players between related parties cannot be included in submitted accounts. Chelsea posted a pre-tax profit of £128.4 million in June 2024, a figure that included the £200 million sale of the women's team to a separate entity within the club's parent company, Bluecoat. The club also sold 2 hotels to a sister company that were used to comply with the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules, which differ from UEFA's regulations last season. There have been reports that Villa have agreed a deal to sell their women's team in order to comply with PSR. For the Premier League, that is. Chelsea have made transfers worth £150 million on 5 players this summer, while Villa have yet to make a major signing. Barcelona were also fined 15 million euros for breaching UEFA financial rules, while Lyon was sanctioned 12.5 million. The French club agreed to be excluded from European competition if their appeal against relegation to League Two for domestic financial breaches fails. That outcome could also impact Palace, whose participation in next season's Europa League is in doubt because they may have breached multi-club ownership rules in relation to American businessman John Textor's involvement at both clubs. There's a lot going on here, Connor. There's a hell of a lot going on. Just before we come to you, get your take on each bit of it. Do you just happen to know right now, there's two different things here, right? A breach of UEFA's football earnings rule and having a squad cost ratio above. So they've broken the squad cost ratio rules and they've broken the football earnings rule. What is the football earnings rule?
Football earnings rule is basically UEFA's equivalent of PSR. So it looks at what your sort of losses look like over a period, and they can't exceed a certain amount. But the reason why it's a bit different to the Premier League PSR is because UEFA specifically disallowed the nonsense that we have going on with the Premier League PSR, around sort of intergroup sales of assets like hotels, car parks, whatever, or sales of your women teams to yourself. So it's a lot more stringent in terms of what's allowed. And the other thing they also review is where there's these sort of player swaps that we had going on. So, like when Douglas Luiz went from Villa to Juventus, but at the same time, Juventus sold some players to Villa, UEFA would disallow that completely in some instances. So wouldn't allow any of the profit to be counted at all on those player transactions, or they would sort of revalue it at an appropriate level. So so that's the football earnings piece, and then separately there's the squad cost ratio, which is basically the percentage of your revenue plus profit on player sales that you spend on wages and amortization. So they broke both of those teams.
Now, it should go without saying, right, that if Chelsea have already spent £150 million, that they're going to benefit again this season and probably in all likelihood qualify for the Champions League next season. So whilst the fines these are the biggest fines in UEFA's PSR sort of relatively short history, aren't they?
They are. I think before PSG and Man City have had sizable fines in the past, but this is the biggest ever that Chelsea have received. I mean, the ironic thing, and you're going to make the point about the fact that obviously, they continue to be in the competition until the further sanctions apply, which we'll come on to. But I mean, PSG, for example, right? They won the Champions League last year, during which they were in a settlement agreement period with UEFA. So I mean, this is the sort of irony of it all.
So we'll park for a second the fact that it's just laughable that you can break the rules to get into the competition, earn 5-6 times more money than you're going to be fined. We'll park that stuff for a second. When they say Chelsea have got 60 million or 55 million quid more potential fines in the future if they don't get themselves in order over the next 4 years, does that mean that they won't get fined next year additional to that? Is this limiting their fines over the next 4 years to 50 million quid? Or if they continue to breach again, if they continue to overspend again next season, will they face the fines from this settlement and further fines next year as well? Or is this locking in their fines over the next 4 years? Because if so, it's 15 million quid a year, isn't it?
So you have to separate it into the two different. So on the UEFA squad cost control piece, so at the moment they've got a fine for that, which was 11 million euros because they went above 80% because it was 80% this year. That's going to fall to 70% next year. So without them having significant movement, one could expect that they're not going to get below 70% right again next year. So they'll get another new fine for that, and it will be more because every time that you foul that UEFA squad cost control, the penalty gets worse each time, right? So next year that'll be worse than 11 million euros. Right. On the football earnings one, I think if they were to continue to let's just say they went, fuck UEFA, we're going to do what we like, and they completely go against what's in the settlement agreement. UEFA will have the right to renegotiate what they decide to do to Chelsea. So, look, I think there's lots of comments, lots of people are saying, and they are right, that the fines, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, are, I suspect Chelsea and Villa both view them as a cost of doing business to some extent, right?
Yeah.
And the benefit of being in European competitions or the Club World Cup or whatever else sort of outweigh those fines that they're hit with. The thing that I think is a bit of a bigger issue for Chelsea, I think Villa might be okay because obviously they've got, in sort of the next year's numbers or whatever, they've got the Sal of Duran to come. They've got the Champions League money from the year that they just got to the quarterfinal, and so they might just about get themselves okay. But with Chelsea, they've basically got, for the 3-year period which ends 30th of June 2026, they can't exceed 65 million euros of football losses, right? And again, I'll just remind everyone that UEFA disallows anything like selling your women's team or your hotel or anything like that. So Chelsea's profit of 128 million, take 200 million off of that. There's huge losses that are being made. So they made big losses in 24 and 2025. So unless for the year ending 30th of June 26, even with the Club World Cup money coming in, unless they make a huge player trading profit and really turn around their operations, I think there's a very, very good chance that Chelsea will be banned from European competition for 1 year because that's one of the points in the settlement agreement.
Yeah. Yeah, but again, like one year's like, I mean, to me, it's just madness that you get like a 3 strikes and you're out, but you can keep breaking it. 1 year you miss out on football, on Champions League football, and then you get to go again because the Premier League rules do allow for all of these things that Chelsea and Villa and everyone else are doing. So like every year you're going to be able, and I do not for the life of me understand why. First and foremost, if you're participating in tournaments that allow you to enter UEFA tournaments, then like there should be one set of rules that is coherent and concise that covers all of the leagues and all of the different tournaments that you can qualify from it. Like even the FIFA World Club Cup, like the FIFA World Club Cup doesn't have any restrictions on like teams from Saudi, teams from New Zealand, all that stuff they haven't got any of those things, right? So if they're on the balance of probability, Saudi can do exactly what they want with regards to their spend. I don't think there's any PSR rules in Saudi Arabia, are there?
Not that I know of. I mean, the nonsense of it all is, I mean, like, with PSR in the Premier League, if someone does fall foul of that, the penalties are quite severe, actually. So you've got like something that's really easy to avoid, but the penalties are very severe if you can't. And then in UEFA, the rules are actually a lot more tightly drafted and stringent, but then they give these really long settlement periods and pretty minuscule fines. And so it's almost like you need an amalgamation of the two, right?
Yeah, 100%.
But the problem is as well is the Premier League clubs didn't even want to change PSR, and they got no because what you've got to remember is PSR is actually, in most cases, more likely, if they made that tighter, more likely to, other than Chelsea and Villa, who have gone a bit outrageous, it's more likely to hit the teams who have less revenue than the ones that have more, because obviously the way the calculation works. So, it's not in the interest of a Wolves, for example, or a, those types of teams to vote against the way that PSR currently runs. The only teams it's really in the interest for it to be a bit stricter is actually teams like Tottenham, right? Because we've got a huge headroom and we're actually too far the other way, and so it would be in our benefit if it was more stringent.
So, in your opinion, I've got my own takes on this, but like, do you? There's a couple of options that were obviously shelved following Manchester City's third-party transactions lawsuit that they won. And by the way, the fact that we still don't know the 115 charges and we're now in July, we were promised to know this by February, then it was March. Now it's all gone quiet. Like, what on God's green earth is happening? But in any event, that's for a different conversation, I guess. The solution, you're absolutely spot on, right? Like the teams at the bottom are just as fearful of PSR as the teams at the top who have the ambitions to spend. Is the solution? There's 2 solutions that were put out. One is to mimic UEFA's rules and then also add something called anchoring, which essentially means that for those of you guys who don't know, that there'd be a multiplier of the bottom team's revenue in the Premier League. So if it was Leicester that made £111 million, then regardless of the revenue of anybody else, you could spend a maximum of 5 times that amount. So for the vast majority of clubs, that would be a benefit. But for teams like Manchester City or Man United, if they earn like £800 million in revenue one year, then they would be limited to £550 million because that's 5 times the amount of revenue that Leicester had. But that's obviously been shelved. And the other option was to have this kind of like carbon tax credit type process where you can essentially, teams that want to can buy, can like negotiate and buy wiggle room from other clubs that aren't necessarily in it. So like Daniel Levy would probably love that, be able to get there and negotiate and sort of exhaust people to death with his hardcore negotiating on, yeah, we've got some wiggle room. You can buy it from us if you want to, because we haven't got the ambition to spend it. So you can buy it off us at, £5 for every pound or something. What do you see as the most logical and sensible solution to being able to kind of close the gap between what we're seeing, which is rampant misuse of the rules? And like you say, like the Premier League seem to have harsher punishments for those that breach, but it's too easy to walk through for those that can.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really difficult because you've got we don't have a time machine, right? So we can't go back to when this all really kicked off, which was Chelsea under Abramovich, and then obviously Man City subsequently. So like, you look at Man City's revenue now, which is basically the main driver for all of these rules and the reason why they're now always comfortable. Their revenue has grown to being the largest Premier League revenue because of all of the cheating that they did before, right? Their owners pumping in 1.3 billion and growing a super successful football club. There's no chance Man City would have ever been able to grow to £700 million of revenue sustainably. So they've already had the benefit of that, right? Which makes it really difficult when you think about how you can set the rules going forward, because that anchoring example, right? Let's just take that as an example. That penalises teams like Tottenham, right, who have actually gone about it in terms of growing our own revenue sustainably by putting huge amounts of debt on the club. We haven't had any owner financing, as a sort of purely business, and I disagree with ambition, but as a purely business football club, we've done it the right way. So that would penalise us, So that's what makes it really challenging. The counter to that as well that smaller clubs will make is, how do we ever break into it then? The new, why shouldn't we, as Newcastle or whoever it is, and we've got really wealthy owners, why shouldn't we be able to break into the elite? Why should Man United benefit from 30, 40 years ago or even longer when they managed to become a huge club, off the back of the Busty Babes and everything else, right? So there's all these arguments that make it really difficult to come up with something that's perfect. For me, UEFA are much, much closer than the Premier League, because at least they disallow all this shite that's going on around the hotels and the women's teams and the player swaps and all of that. But I think it's probably like what UEFA have got, but with actual penalties that are serious, from day one. You're not given these huge settlement periods, whatever else. But yeah, it's a really difficult. But this is why I get so frustrated, because I look at Tottenham's numbers, and a lot of people are commenting the same thing about, and we're not in the world where we even need to think about cheating any of these rules. We've got such headroom and space that we just need to take advantage of that without even worrying.
Okay, so I mean, we won't talk too much more about the FFP thing, but we'll move it into football stuff now for the sort of next 25, 30 minutes, mate. Sure. In terms of obviously where we are at with regards to FFP and PCL, there is no issue with Tottenham, but the ambition is the problem. Now, do you think? I mean, there's a little bit of noise out today, for what it's worth, for those guys who haven't seen it. That Sonny, apparently, according to Asian-football.com, someone came out. I don't know if these guys are any good or not. They claimed to know, or said first that in February that Sonny was talking to LAFC, and that story obviously broke in with Graham Bailey a couple of days ago. And on the back of that, a lot of Tottenham fans were thinking, it's probably going to go. In this case of this particular tweet that came out today, they're saying actually that Sonny's decided to stay at Tottenham. He's going to stay for one last year to have one last crack at the Champions League. at Tottenham. As a Tottenham fan, and I want to ask you guys in the chat as well about this. I'm going to put a poll up in a second. Is this good news for Tottenham or bad news for Tottenham? Because a lot of Tottenham fans are saying, perfect, we get our Sonny boy for one more year. But I worry about the sort of the byproduct consequences of that. Are that if you don't get the 30 million that you might have been able to get in a transfer fee, if you don't get him out of the way, then you're going to have to find movement in the squad elsewhere. Does that increase the likelihood of us sort of lowering the price to make sure that Romero does leave, so that we can raise some funds somewhere else? Because Daniel Levy and ENIC don't seem to want to put their hand in their pocket and spend money that apparently the cash flow won't allow for. Does Sonny staying somehow? Is it good news in terms of you might have a player that can play as a left wing forward and do a bit, in a new system, he might be able to have a revamp? Or is it bad news in as much as our plans are getting a bit derailed?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I've spoken about it a couple of times on pods. The view for me with Son is that this was the right time for him to move on. It felt like no better time off the back of him winning the Europa with us, and obviously, he's been such a fantastic signing for us. I don't think anyone wants to see him have that decline any further in his last season with us. And obviously, sometimes you just got to think, when is the best time for everyone to move on, and you go into the next phase. So for me, getting that 30 million or whatever it was for him was sensible if that was going to come. But look, I think. Yeah, and people make the point, well, he's such a commercial draw. I've seen people comment he's going to bring in more than 30 million. He won't bring in more than 30 million in a year. Let's just be clear. He definitely is. He is a draw, and he brings in revenue clearly, but it's not anywhere like 30, 40 million. So in a year. So yeah, I think my preference would have been to move him on now, and for Spurs to move on, but I do love Son as well, so who knows? Who knows? Frank might get more from him if he's not being played as a touchline winger, and he puts him as like an inside forward in the play. But for me, he is on the decline.
Yes, I'm in the same camp. I think he has to leave, to be honest. But obviously, you can't sort of force these people out the door. He's got 1 year left on his contract, and it makes you wonder whether or not does he want to stay for that. I don't think that money drives him, right? But we're seeing this a lot. We're seeing it with Ibrahim Konate. We're seeing it with Mark Gahey. We might be seeing it with Bissouma. We're certainly seeing it with Caicedo. We're certainly maybe seeing it with Jadon Sancho. That when you've got these players that are on with 1 year left, and they know that Saudi's around the corner, that maybe he's going to pay them out in a massive way in a year's time, that they're all just saying, "No, I'm not leaving." Doing the sort of DiCaprio Wolf of Wall Street thing. And consequently, I wonder whether or not is the motivation to have one more crack at the Champions League? What does he really think we're going to achieve in the Champions League? And on that basis, the best chance for us to do well in the Champions League is to be able to bring in some new names that might be, predicated on the idea that we have some money to spend. I don't know what Daniel Levy's going to spend net without any kind of help in the regards of sales, but also just that, like I say, that squad space, right? If Sonny does stay and you've got Sonny and Tell on the left, and you have Odebear and Johnson on the right, and we're trying to sign Kudus, and you've got Maddison and Decky. There's only one more person that you can really sell from that that squad, which is Manor Solomon. Apparently, Thomas Frank wants to take a look at him. So, I don't know what we're going to do here, but I think we were all kind of, and I think the club probably were relying on the fact that we were going to be able to move on Sonny this summer, right? Should we have even extended the contract for another year? Do you was that sort of thing a bit of a sort of a naive move, because this is now the situation that we might find ourselves in, where we've got a player that doesn't want to go or possibly doesn't want to go, and consequently we can't sort of move forward with our plans. How much money do you think we were going to get from him anyway?
Yeah, I think maybe they were so mindful of him leaving on a free, right? 30 million feels like the right number, doesn't it? That's the number that's often spoken about. But yeah, I mean, I agree. I think whatever your view is, and look, I've got lots of views on our attacking forwards, and my overarching view is none of them are really good enough. Now. Son obviously has been, right? Let's just be clear. In his peak, he was world class, right? He's been fantastic. But right now, I don't think. And there comes a stage where you go, well, look, they've just signed Tell, so that one's done. They're not going to move Odegaard on after he had, his first season with us and he was injured for half of it, whatever your view is on him. So as you say, it's just a numbers game here, isn't it? Of who is moving on then. And we spoke about it the other day, Sean, as well. The thing that's worrying me somewhat, almost as much as the sort of lack of players we're linked with, is the lack of clubs that are linked with our players. In terms of
no one,
Richalison and Bissouma as well. And these types of players.
Bissouma was going to be going to Turkey, but now Thomas Partey's taking all the. Well, maybe. I mean, we don't know, but like that comment when someone said, "I'll check the non-extradition," and Turkey being on that list is a little bit more. There's just more smoke everywhere.
So it's difficult.
It is, yeah. Blame with the super chat, mate. My member chat wasn't about Partey. That's something else entirely. I was referencing Villa, Chelsea, etc. getting away with their UEFA. Yeah, I know. Oh, sorry, I know, Blaine. Yeah, 100%.
You know that, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't about you, mate. I'm just saying that I've walked into a show and probably put my foot in my mouth about 3 or 4 times that I hope that I'm small enough as a channel that no one's going to pay any attention to. But please forgive me either way. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. Sean, the paddy cap looks better. Thank you very much, Blaine. Very generous, mate. I'll always call your chats up, mate. You haven't got to put super chats in, but I do appreciate. Sean, the paddy cap looks better, mate. Everyone tells me the paddy cap looks shit, so I go and buy a new cap, and now I'm getting out. Now I'm getting put the paddy cap back on. What are we doing here? What are we saying? So, mate, we're talking about the title of the show is obviously disgraces galore. I do want to ask you this, mate. Like, people are losing their mind about the quietness of the window. You just mentioned the fact that there's no real sort of noise about outgoings. Clearly, we've been linked with 3 or 4 players, but maybe only 1 or 2 of them are moving. It's very, very like we're walking through treacle here. But is everyone going into meltdown a little bit too soon? Like, how many clubs have really done that much business? And does it matter if you do all your business early or late? Does it really matter if Tottenham are waiting to see? Because there's always players available, aren't there? Even if we do lose out on Kudus to Chelsea, even if we do lose out on Eze to Arsenal, even if Mbeumo does end up going to United, it's not like there's nothing left. There's no more. There's plenty of fish in the sea.
Yeah, I think there's a few points on that. I mean, I think the context of Liverpool, City, and Chelsea going pretty big and hasn't helped, right? And I think obviously the context of us having finished 17th and everyone worried that we need to do a fair amount of work is obviously part of it, and really wanting to kick on post winning the Europa. I do think that whatever our view is, and clearly he could have done some of this work during the long interview process. Frank coming in and changing the manager has inevitably delayed things, right? I think that's for sure, and most of the players were coming back today, weren't they? I think as well. So there's a bit of, but yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, obviously you want players in as early as possible in pre-season so they get more time with the squad and get more time to get used to Frank's ideas and whatever else. But yeah, we'll have to see. As you say, there are other teams that haven't done a huge amount either. So yeah, I mean, I was chatting to Sava about this earlier, right, on his show, and I was saying, I think what hasn't helped us with selling players is obviously the sort of painfulness of dealing with Levy and Tottenham when it comes to buying players off of us. Probably doesn't help because of Levy's modus operandi, which is that he never wants to come away from the negotiation table without feeling like he's won. And the fact that across Europe, save for Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, PSG, most of the teams are in financial dire straits, right? And so you're not necessarily getting that sort of buy-in. And as you've made the point a few times, Saudi has gone as well to some extent because players don't want to go out there. So it does make it a bit more difficult in terms of selling those players.
Got this story out from Fabrizio Romano said on via Chelsea News. He provided an update on Kudus in a video on YouTube a little bit earlier on this evening. He said Tottenham is seriously working for Mohamed Kudus and are speaking to his camp. Chelsea remains interested and is keeping a close eye on the situation with one other club. Let's see what they decide. The race is still open. if it turns out that Mohamed Kudus does end up going to Chelsea, and you could see it happening, right? You could easily see Daniel Levy doing all of the kind of the front of the peloton work, and then taking all the wind resistance, and then someone else like Tobo just picks up the phone and says, "How much did they offer you? 70 million. Okay, we'll just do it then." And you could easily see it in a world where that doesn't happen, because I think, look, everyone makes out that Chelsea have got 1,000 wingers. They really don't. If you actually look at their first team squad, they actually don't have that many wingers. And if they do sell Noni Madueke, then it makes a little bit of sense, right? So a couple of questions here. Like, do you want... Because I was asking this question as well with regards Rodrigo. Okay, so do Arsenal hold the key to Tottenham's sort of summer in the forward spot, in as much as that if Arsenal go and get Rodrigo, then Eze is more likely to go somewhere else if he does want to leave Palace. And there's not many other teams that could afford Eze that would want him, that would have the need, right? So in a world where you want Eze, Rodrigo, who's a better player than Eze, going to Arsenal would be painful, because that means that they accelerate and go again, and the gap widens further. But that's the only sort of world where I can see where Eze would end up at Tottenham. And at the same time, does Arsenal buying Noni Madueke from Chelsea accelerate the likelihood that Chelsea gazump us for Kudus? So do we kind of want Arsenal to buy Rodrigo, but not to buy Madueke, or at least not yet, so that Tottenham can maybe go and do a double bomber? Or is that just dream world thinking?
Sean, you're one step ahead, because as you was talking then, I was going to mention the Madueke one on the other side, but you already picked it up. It's a really interesting point. I think the short answer is probably yes to some extent, right? Because we know that, Arsenal are more likely to get their targets over the line quicker, which leaves us, as always, sort of on the whim of everyone else and what they're doing, right? I think, look, if Chelsea, I can see Chelsea selling Madueke for what it's worth. I think I could see that one happening, because I think
Arsenal buying him though. Do you rate Madueke? Would you take him back at Tottenham? He's a club trained player as well, right? So.
I don't know if he counts. He don't count as clubs, because he weren't here for long enough. I don't think. But would I take him back at Spurs? Do I rate him? Not hugely. I'd rather have Kudus. So I can see why Chelsea will have that same logic, I suppose. In terms of replacing him. The other thing is when we were chatting about the model with Chelsea and how they get themselves okay with all of this stuff, they have to have this constant churn of players, right? Because they need to, get that profit on player sales. So have a bit of amortization booked for them, sell them for more, and get that profit on player sales so they can make themselves all right. So it doesn't surprise me that they are looking to move on players that they only signed 2 or 3 years ago in a way that we never do, right? So,
because if they can get their money back, if they can get full money back on the player, but they've amortized him off a couple of years, then that's 40% back on it in FFP.
Exactly. So obviously a big driver of their sort of profit on player sales has been selling academy kids, because you get the full whack. Yeah. But even if they can get, as you say, 2 years back on someone at the moment, they might need that. So they need to make really quick decisions on players as to whether they're going to be the future or not. And because they spent so much and bought so many, they got loads of those players to make that decision on, right? So Madueke is definitely an example of that. But yeah, I mean, it's a surprising one and I know I've got a lot of Arsenal fan mates, unfortunately. But a lot of them are a bit baffled by the Madueke links, because obviously his best position's on the right. They've got Saka. So you're signing him to sit on the bench again. I don't really get it, I have to say. I mean, you'd think they would be solely focusing on the number 9 and the left winger rather than Madueke, but we'll see.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to get up the Chelsea squad in a minute just to have a quick look, see if and we'll do the same game with Aston Villa, because obviously Aston Villa are going to need to sell some players as well pretty quickly to be able to get themselves the right side for their competition. We've heard about Jacob Ramsey. I put a video out the other day of one of the West Ham spokespeople for the Sullivan owner. David Sullivan turned around and said, apparently to West Ham News, he's heard he's going to Tottenham. I really don't think that Jacob Ramsey is the sort of player that we need. He's a really good. I like him when he's fit, but he doesn't really suit our need or our vibe, especially if Sonny's going to be here. Even though I don't think of him as a left winger, I think of him as a left midfielder in a more of a balanced sort of defensive role. So
he's another sort of number 8 again, isn't he? I think. Well, we've got them coming out of our ears, haven't we?
100%. Just before we get into that, though, Daniel Field with a couple of super stickers. They don't come up on StreamYard, Daniel, but they do come up. I just realised on YouTube. So I can't see YouTube generally, but I have got them up, so I can see the super chats, the super stickers you put in. One of them is a teddy bear, I think, that's saying that's doing a smiley. Very nice, mate. Thank you very much. And the other one is behind the scenes. I think behind the scenes, like a film clipboard or something. Not sure
We're
what that
both
means.
a little bit teddy bear looking, Sean, aren't we? So I suppose maybe that's why we got the teddy bear.
I'll take it. I don't mind. I've been called a lot worse today, mate. I've been called a hell of a lot worse. Thank you very much, Daniel Field, for the super stickers, mate. Appreciate you very much. Let's have a quick look, see, right? So if Chelsea and Aston Villa, I'll get rid of this fucking thing again. If Chelsea and Villa do want to or do have to sell some players, this is Chelsea's squad. Filtered by market valuation. Could you see this guy leaving? Levi Colwill, centre back, 22 years old. He came through the? Didn't he come through the?
Yeah, he did, didn't he? And then they loaned him to Brighton. Was that
to
right?
Newcastle, wasn't it? Was it to Newcastle he went to? Let's have a look.
Or was it Brighton? Can't remember. Maybe I'm making that up.
He went to Brighton. You're absolutely right. There you go, Brighton. Yeah. So I wonder if he'll.
So that's yeah.
He might be someone that goes. Trevor Chalobah. He could be someone that leaves the club. Axel Disasi, he's gone to Villa, hasn't he?
Oh yeah.
This guy's absolutely dog shit. Benoit. So I'm just trying to think where they're going
to. Someone just commented on page 1 of 26, which is enjoyable. But anyway.
Does it actually go to page 2? No, it doesn't. No, they're all here. Page 1 of 26, 100%. Let me go out there. Jesus God, like you can look. Why have they got?
You look at the thing is the business they've done this summer. There's not. I know they've spent a decent whack now with Gittins as well, but like the Delap signing, you take that. 30 million was very good, wasn't it? And that's. So that's why I could even see them, moving on someone like Jackson, right, who's been there for a few years now. Back to that point we were making.
Yeah,
if they could sell Jackson for 40-50 million, not that I would pay that for him necessarily. He's all right, but let's just say they do. Arguably, there's a decent whack of player profit again, isn't it, on the
100%
versus the amortization piece? So,
what happens to Mudryk? Is his case gone to appeal? Do you know? What's that? Sorry.
Yeah, I think he's banned, isn't he?
I know he's banned at the moment, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that he was appealing it because it wasn't. We all thought it was cocaine, but it wasn't. It was some other substance, wasn't it? That was performance enhancing.
Peds, yeah, I think it was Peds, yeah.
This guy's obviously looking for a new home. Christopher Nkunku. Would you take Nkunku at Tottenham? I don't know if we'll ever do business with Chelsea, but would you take Nkunku?
If you could guarantee to me that he would be fit, then yeah, and the player he was in Germany, perhaps. But I think it's too much of a risk for us where we are right now. We need sure things, don't we?
I'll tell you what, mate. I'd go and give them 50, 60 million quid for Lavia. I know that would help them out and get them out of a jam, but I think Lavia is the exact type of player that we could do with. 21 years old. He fits the profile.
Brilliant, but again, he's quite injury prone as well, isn't he?
He's injury prone. Yeah.
But I think he is outstanding. But it's So someone's just asked, what do we think of Chelsea's wage structure? To be fair, they've started to bring it down from where it was. A lot of these players, they've signed everyone and their dog, but they have actually, in terms of wages, it is slowly coming down in terms of what they're actually offering.
Do you know what the average? Like, have you ever seen the list of average wages per week? I think Tottenham squad is at 83 grand a week per wage. Like, we don't have many people over 100, but we have everybody seems to be around 60 to 80. Is that fair?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is when you look at and this is useful for people in the chat, perhaps when they're looking these websites like this, Capology and stuff, they're pretty bad. There's because we can do the maths from the accounts and work it backwards, and it's like that doesn't quite make sense overall in terms of the example I had on Twitter the other week was Verts, and the media all reporting that Verts was going to be paid 200 grand a week, there is no chance he's on 200 grand a week. He's on way more than that. Just because we can work out what Liverpool averagely pay players, and given he's going to be demanding to be in at least their sort of top 5 paid players, he's got to be on that sort of 300 mark.
Yeah, 100%, mate. 100%.
Sometimes you can't believe what's spanning the media and what's on Capology, etc.
Yeah, but the amount of times that like I read something somewhere, then I'll say it on a video, and then you see the things that I've added to the story, my own little bit of salt and pepper, that then get repeated somewhere else, And like, I'm obviously not in any way, shape, or form an ITK, but the amount of times that it's the same cycle of stories that get fed around and whipped up into like a nice 99 flake, it's absolutely madness. I want to look at this Aston Villa list, mate. Do you think if Aston Villa have got to sell before they can buy, any of these players you think? I mean, Leon Bailey's probably going to leave. Would you take Leon Bailey, by the way, for the right money, for like 20 million quid? If I mean, obviously it's not a dream world signing, but I think Leon Bailey's when he's up for it, he's a real handful.
I think he's decent, but it comes back to that point that we've got an abundance of okay wingers, and it's like, you know, the signings that I want to see in those attacking positions have got to be sort of significantly better, or sort of needle movers, or whatever you want to call them. So for that reason, no. But that's not to say I don't think Bailey, for example, is as good as, or if not better than, the likes of Odobert and, you know, those types of players.
I don't know.
But yeah, I mean,
more Villa are going to get themselves out of trouble, mate. Sorry, go on, carry on.
Yeah. Villa are a bit. They're closer, and you can tell that just by the level of fine as well, because the level of fine is basically how badly, you know, you've breached. And as I say, they have got the Duran money and the Champions League money coming in, and they also haven't signed anyone yet, in the way that Chelsea are still going. Yeah, look, I think they'll probably, Ramsey's a smart one for them to move on, obviously, because I'm pretty sure he came through their academy, did he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. But I just don't know who's going to pay £40 million for him, and where's he going to go? I really hope he doesn't come to Tottenham. I just don't think he's good enough. I think he's probably arguably as good as like maybe like a Bentancur and less injury prone, but he doesn't play that much for Aston Villa, and he's like I don't know how to think of him, because he's like a left midfielder, but like not in like a wing forward or an attacking winger sense. He's more of like the left of an 8, but slightly more attacking. But I don't know what club, where would he go? Could he end up going to a team like Newcastle for depth? Would he want to go
West
to be
Ham
another
were linked,
player?
weren't they? I think in the event that Kudus goes, I think I saw West Ham linked, but yeah, I don't. Yeah,
I don't know where else they can raise the cash.
Well,
I mean, Matty Cash, would they sell him? He's a good right back, isn't he?
There's talk of Martinez going, who obviously is not going to bring in huge in terms of fee, given age, etc.
Well, I think Martinez. I think United were looking at him for 40 million quid, actually, so that's not a bad.
Oh, were they? So there you go, and that's going to be and I suspect he's probably one of their highest paid. In terms of wages. So it's part of, you know, as I say, Villa are not in quite as dire straits as Chelsea. So part of it might be looking at where they can just sort of make more gradual changes in terms of cutting wage bill and things as well, given they've been given the settlement period.
Yeah, they certainly wouldn't want to sell. Oh, I lost my page. They certainly wouldn't want to sell Konza. They certainly wouldn't want to sell Pau Torres.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Mate, we haven't got much long to go, but I just wanted to do a quick Audi tonight. So thanks very much. But I wanted to ask you, what's the in your mind when are Tottenham going to finally get one over the line? Not another kid, but like, when are we going to sign someone that's like, 24, that's a first teamer somewhere, where everyone sits up and goes, and will it necessarily be one of these names we're already aware of, or could it be a bomber from Johan Lang, where we're all sitting there twiddling our thumbs, desperate for some news, and then all of a sudden it's Tottenham are talking to X, deal done, here we go. And if so, who?
Oh, yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, we end up getting ourselves excited, don't we? Every time, as a now Kudus is the one, and everyone's sort of starting to get themselves comfortable with that signing and wanting that signing to happen. And then, yeah, again, you've got this Chelsea looming like the Undertaker in that meme where he's standing behind you, So, yeah, I think it has to happen in the next couple of weeks, doesn't it? I think, by mid-July, surely we get another, as you say, a sort of essential signing over the line. But let's see.
I wanted to ask you this one, mate. So because we spoke about doing this the other day, and I never got a chance to ask you. This guy, Habibullah Khan, he's got like 32,000 following on Twitter. And he was saying, I think he was on a podcast, right? That was talking about
Bateman,
with Flab, talking about Daniel Levy and how he levied up the he levied Qatar basically, or Qatar got levied, essentially saying that that he's familiar with all the things going on in the Middle East. I haven't listened to the podcast, but I've seen a lot of clips from it, and a lot of people doing takes on it. What's your take on his take on everything? Because when I looked through his, I saw his own comments and saw his own feedback and that, and then I went and searched in his own personal timeline and just put the word like Levy in to see how many times it popped up. And he had like basically every other tweet that he's done regarding Tottenham is basically something like a Levy out guy who's just saying, Levy out, leads to disgrace, change for Tottenham stuff, all this stuff. And so I always say that like it doesn't mean just because someone feels a certain way that what they're saying isn't necessarily true, but it can open you up to the idea of there being like those comments being loaded with bias, like positivity bias, confirmation bias, whatever. Did you listen to the podcast? What was your take on it? If you did.
Yeah, I did listen to it. And look, I'm someone that wants ENIC to go, right? So, it would be in my benefit to say that that podcast is consistent with some of the criticisms that I lay on Levy, etc., etc. But I do also have to be consistent in the logic that I typically try to apply, which is, unless something is evidenced by something that is factual or with real data, it's quite difficult for me to, make the point and support it. And I have to say that I listened to the podcast and I've spoken to him a little bit because obviously he's seen some of my stuff on X and everything else. But my view is we don't have any proof that any of that stuff is true. It's all conjecture, right? It's all he knows, she knows, someone who was in the room with Levy. Some of the stuff about it wouldn't surprise you if it was true because of what we do know about the way that Levy negotiates and the fact that it can be difficult. And if he applies the way that he does to football transfers to a negotiation on that sort of stature, then it's believable, right? But at the same time, I can't sit here and say to you, Sean, oh yeah, that's definitely, because no one knows, right? And I have to say, I do find it's a bit disingenuous to platform something like that in some ways, isn't it? Because it's all
hearsay, right?
Hearsay.
Yeah.
And
so I'm not sure. I've spoken to the guy, and he's going to come on the podcast on the channel when he gets back from traveling. So I'm not in any way trying to sort of do him dirty or anything here, because obviously everyone gets their chance to respond. But
yeah, of course, yeah. And look, I'd like, it suits me for that to be true. And look, I don't, you know my view on it. I dislike ENIC, and it wouldn't shock me. And it may well be true, but we can't. It's not something any of us can say with any certainty, is it?
100%. Like I say, just because he's got a clear persuasion about Daniel Levy doesn't mean exactly that he's saying that nothing's true. But I just put his name in and typed in Daniel Levy, right? But he's saying it's all kind of like, I hate Daniel Levy so much, I hate ENIC so much, calling the guy a cancer, or the people a cancer too. I detest Levy. And so like there's just loads and loads and loads of them, right? But when you see that sort of thing, you kind of go like, that gets obviously his say on a massive platform like Flabs or however you say his name, obviously then gets sort of validated as being confirmed as fact, right? But to me, I just think it's a little bit unhelpful when no one knows, like not even him. He won't, like no one will possibly know, surely, unless he's got in with the actual people, the businessmen of Qatar. They'll all be under NDAs, right? They're not gonna like breach non-disclosure agreements to tell some guy on Twitter what they think about what happened in a confirmation in a conversation about a takeover, right? So like I think there's a duty of care to make sure that everyone knows that that's not necessarily the case. Just because someone says so doesn't mean that it is,
Yeah, and I mean the other thing is, you know, the guy obviously has got some links to Qatar, has worked in Qatar or whatever else, and you know, it was very much in favour of, you know, Qatar are going to do all this great work. They're gonna gentrify Tottenham, but still make it so that the poorer people could still live there, and you know somehow, and it was all very much, you know, Qatar's got issues by the way. Let's not get political, but there are, you know, and I want ENIC to go, and for me personally, I wouldn't be that fussed if Qatar bought us because I'd be happy about the cash getting injected.
Same.
I know that other people have stance on it, and obviously that wasn't addressed at all. But yeah, I mean, look, you know, there's a couple of comments, people saying, "Is this a case where you try to undermine a source of information you don't like?" Well, that isn't the case for me because I like, you know, I want that to be the case. I'm just giving a
balance. By the way, I want Qatar to take over Tottenham as well, as long as they're going to come in and do all the things that, and as long as there's no chance of. Again, Stevie, like I'm not a Levy. If you hear me on if you hear me on this channel, I don't defend Daniel Levy. I call Daniel Levy out all the time for all of the things that I think he does wrong. But when people hear me on third-party channels, like I go on Sabbers and have a ding-dong with Lubo every couple of days, it's not because I think that he's even lands on the wrong answer. He might be right in terms of his take on Levy, but how he gets there is, and how other people get there is my challenge. Right? I challenge logic. I don't. And that obviously just means that when you're in a pool of people that always feel a certain way, okay, well, let me figure out what that logic looks like. And if there's an issue with it, then I'm just going to call it out. A, because it's good debate, it's good content. And B, because, you know, there is, like I say, there's a responsibility when you're talking to thousands of people on a stream, like it or otherwise. Like sometimes people say things because they feel a certain way, and then that stuff can sort of eke its way into the zeitgeist. So it's important to kind of to challenge opinions and to make sure that when people say a certain thing that at least they can land on it. At least you can follow the train of thought to get there. Like I always say, I love Sabbath to pieces, disagree with him on so many things, but you can't ever argue that he doesn't get there logically in his narrative, you know?
Yeah, and to be fair, that's probably the reason why we've had some disagreements over Levy and ENIC in the short time we've been streaming together, but it's you know, it's never got that sort of heated because most of my observations on ENIC and Levy are not. I try to separate the emotion as much as I can as a football fan, but and I criticise the sort of overall model things, which are things that are hard to argue with, right? So this is why that I'm not sure about this Qatar pod, but look, I pray that they do come back in and they do buy us, and then we, you know, become the club that we all want Tottenham to be. But let's see.
100%, mate. I'm not sure if I've got the answer from you regarding who it is that who is our next signing going to be. Did you tell me?
Oh yeah. Let me go out on a whim. I'll say we'll get Kudus over the line.
We'll get Kudus over the line. Okay, cool. And after that, apparently we're pivoting to a centre back, which is fine if if we're losing Romero, right? But when we're linked today with we've been linked for quite a while with this Coney de Winter. I don't know if you're too familiar with Coney de Winter, mate. He's a really good centre back, an up and coming player. He's big, strong, strapping, 6'3", good in the air. He can carry the ball out. I'm a big fan of his. But for me, even if you do sell Romero, another centre back for the moment is not the priority. I think once you get rid of, once you do the forward line thing, you've got to move to the midfield, haven't you? You've got to start moving players on and get someone in that can solve the 6 issue or the 8 issue, the double pivot.
Yeah, my worry is that he's another right centre back as well. You know, which implies to me that Romero is going.
He's leaving. Yeah.
I think there's an argument that where we actually lack depth in the centre back position is left centre back because you know Van der Ven, who gets injured a lot, and then you've got Ben Davies coming in who's not good enough, or you're playing one of them slightly out of position. So yeah, I you know that everyone is desperate for us to sign someone in midfield, right? Who's an actual 6. I'm worried about the lack of links there, but perhaps this is one where Langer is working in the shadows, as apparently he does. It's quite a convenient argument, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, or Paratici's doing something behind the scenes. I think his ban is up in the next couple of days. I know he's got like a rolling contract until the end of the month, but I just like to see him walk through the door with like, you know, return of the Mac, sort of like a Tottenham news drop on Monday morning or Tuesday, whenever it will be, when his contract's over, and he's like, "Hi everybody, I'm back." back. And then bang, 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 the links start dropping thick and fast. The plates are spinning and the content can keep on contenting. But yeah, I don't know. Leone, another one. Yeah, no, Leone's a baller. I like the look of him. And then we've got more kids. We've got that Pisili guy we're looking at. We're looking at that guy from AZ Alkmaar, Keys Smith, who I did a video on earlier on. He looks like a good player as well. But it's all a little bit childish, isn't it? We need to get some men through the door, mate. Some big, strong, muscly men. And then we can hopefully feel a bit more confident going forward.
Absolutely. And particularly in the midfield, I think that, that's where that, for me, that we've spoken about before, but that number 6 needs to be a real man.
A monster. Yeah. I don't need much in life. Just want a monster 6. That's all I've been asking for it for 3 years. And we can't. No one's bringing me any presents in the shape of a 6. No. Mate, Connor, I'm gonna leave it there, mate, because I only want to do a quick hour with you, mate. But thank you so much for coming on, buddy. Guys, stay where you are. We're gonna send you straight over to Sava. I think he's going live now as well. Thank you, everyone. Please do smash the like on the way out. Smash the subscribe if you haven't already. You'll see me bright and early tomorrow morning with more from Outdoors with Bugsy. But Connor, thanks so much, mate. What's coming up on Leavynomics, mate? You got any more tweets, any more detail and data coming out?
Yeah, I need to more podcasts, and I've been whoring myself around a little bit, so I'll be doing a bit more of that, and then yeah, I've got some stuff. I'm going to try and see if I can work out all of the flows between the Enix subsidiaries and everything else, and do a bit of a monster thread on that at some point. And I know you want to do the Turkish piece as well, don't you? At some point.
Oh, it's definitely a thing going on in Turkey, mate. 100%.
Let's try and do that.
100%. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate everyone. Cheers, Connor, mate. Get over to Leavynomics1882 on Twitter. He's great. He's great value, great addition to the community. Loving getting to know him. And we will. You got to love you, Connor. You got some love, Daniel. You get a lot of likes. You get a lot of big up Connors. You got the first love, I think. I've not seen a love for Connor like that one before.
Love you too, Daniel.
Appreciate you all, guys. See you tomorrow. Have a good evening. Stay there over the Sabbath. Take care. Oh, smash Sean Raid. Smash Sean Raid. Love you guys. Take care. See you later. Bye-bye.